welcome back to the Stitches and Scribbles channel. My name is Erin and I have a book podcast for you today. So these are going to be all the books that I read in June. And I did read quite a few books this month, although not quite as many as I thought I was going to, because I kind of got back on my audiobook habit. And while I do love audiobooks and love that you can read them while doing other things, it does take me significantly longer to get through an audiobook compared to a print book. I do read really fast, and depending on the content of the book, I can read anywhere between 100 and 200 pages an hour, obviously dependent on things like the font size and the size of the physical pages, but also the content within the book. Versus an audiobook, I typically listen to anywhere from 1.2 to 1.5 speed, so it takes me less than the number of hours it says that it is, but still several hours to finish a book. So a lot of reading this month, but not as many titles as I thought I would. And if you're watching for the first time, you might think that this is still a lot of books for 1 month. I am also someone who works in a school, so I'm on summer break for the month of June. So that also contributes to the amount of books that I can read in a given month. But let's dive into the books themselves, because I had some really good ones this month that I really enjoyed reading. The first one that I read was Booked for Murder by PJ Nelson. This is one that I think I maybe just bought from Barnes & Noble. I do remember buying the book, but I can't remember if I got it from Half Price Books or from Barnes & Noble, and of course the sticker for either of those is gone. I think for some reason I'm thinking that this was from Half Price Books. It's just in pretty good condition for being from Half Price Books, but like a little bit of wear and tear on the edges, and I can't tell if that's just what I did in the course of having the book or if it was like that when I got it. But anyway, this was a murder mystery and it takes place in a southern town in Georgia, and it follows the main character Madeline, who takes over her aunt's house when her aunt passes away, and her aunt also had a bookshop that she was running out of her house, and she's kind of trying to figure out whether or not her aunt was kind of up to something before she died, but also as soon as she arrives, someone attempts to set the gazebo in her backyard on fire and then also sets the house on fire. So she's trying to figure out who did both of those things. This book had really great atmospheric writing. It very much drew you in as the reader. This to me kind of felt like a combination between like Murder, She Wrote and Gilmore Girls. It was very cozy, lots of like fun, quirky characters, but then with this very kind of rich southern small town background. Highly recommend this one. It definitely kept me guessing throughout the book. The way that it kind of wrapped up was definitely not what I expected. So I would highly recommend this to people who are looking for a good step up from a cozy mystery. I would say it's still slightly darker than a true cozy mystery genre book. It's definitely like a step up from that in terms of how dark it is, but very good for someone who either typically reads only cozy mysteries and is looking for something a little bit more in the murder department, or someone who reads regular mysteries and is looking for something slightly softer. So this is a really, really good one. The next book I read is one of a few books recently where I've been kind of into retellings. I have a few more on my shelf. I realize there's only 2 that I read this month, but I have more that I'm excited to read. This one was Morgan Is My Name by Sophie Keach. Oh, I forgot to say, I always do this. I gave this book 4 stars. Morgan Le Fay by Sophie Keach. I also gave this 4 stars. This is a retelling following Morgan of Cornwall, who becomes Morgan Le Fay in the Arthurian legend, and follows her upbringing being Uther Pendragon's stepdaughter. And this book was also very well written, very atmospheric, in obviously a very different way than the other one. But a very, very interesting way to tell Morgan's story. The only thing about this one that I didn't like is, and I should have known this before picking up the book, so this is more of a me issue. I really struggle with books where you can tell the main character is going to end up being the villain of the story, which Morgan Le Fay is one of the at least morally gray characters in Arthurian legend, depending on the interpretations, but frequently also shown as the villain. And this is kind of, the whole book is kind of an excuse as to why she makes the decisions that she does. And while I found the storytelling interesting, I think I wasn't willing to invest more time in the series because I could see where it was going with Morgan being not a good character. I don't know what the rest of the series looks like because this is a trilogy. But it wasn't something that I wanted to spend more time on because I could feel myself getting very invested in the character and her storyline. But kind of, especially towards the end of the book, you can see that it's going in a direction where she will either be faced with some really difficult decisions or she will start making not so positive choices. So very good storytelling, but thematically not for me in that case. So that's all I'll say about that one. The next one I'm actually really excited about. This is The Interior Castle by St. Teresa of Avila. And if you've seen my podcast before, you know that I go to adoration every week with my mom, and I prefer to spend my time in adoration reading. So this was the book that I had for end of May into June to read during adoration. And this is actually a special edition of this book from My Catholic Library, which is a book box subscription company that does special editions of Catholic theological books that they send to you every month. So they're all kind of this same style of a really pretty detailed cover, usually with gold or metallic inlay, or not inlay, embossing, is that the word? Where it's shiny? Of some sort, and designed to all be matching editions. So this one was really interesting. St. Teresa of Avila, even though it was a really dense book, like I'll be honest, I struggled to read most of this. She herself is very funny. There are multiple points in the book where she kind of lets you know as the reader that she'd really rather be doing anything else than write this book, but she knows that it's important, so she has to do it. And she also is writing this addressed directly to her fellow religious sisters, which is kind of unique in books like this. We don't often get theological books that are addressed to women specifically, so that was a very interesting thing to see. But she's also very funny, and I know St. Teresa is one of her most famous quotes is she gets very upset at God and says something along the lines of, if this is how you treat your friends, no wonder you have so few. So she's very aware of kind of the plight of human suffering, but uses it to make the best of it and also to think about theology and philosophy. So her concept of the interior castle is kind of a way of visualizing your spiritual life. And I'm definitely not going to explain this correctly, partially because a lot of this book was a little over my head. But she's comparing your soul to a castle with multiple like rooms or levels in it, and each one is like kind of the layers of being fully present with God. So conceptually, this was very interesting. This is not a light read by any means, but very cool, and really excited about the company that I received this from. I have since received 2 more books from this book box company. This was the book that I received in April. I'm currently reading the one that I received in May, and then I have also received the one for June. But really, really neat editions. I'm trying to read the one I'm on a little bit faster so that I can be kind of back on track to be reading the one that I receive every month. But highly recommend both the company, and that's My Catholic Library, and also the book itself, even though it is dense. I think this probably would have been better to read like a tiny bit of it every night for a longer period of time than trying to tackle like big chunks of it during a half an hour adoration session. But it was very good, and Teresa of Avila is at times very funny. The next book I read, this is the other retelling that I did this month, was Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. And this one, oh, I gave The Interior Castle 5 stars. I'm always going to forget the number of stars I gave things. Ariadne, also, I gave 5 stars. This is a retelling of the story of Ariadne, which is also the story of Theseus and the Labyrinth and the Minotaur. Ariadne is actually the half-sibling of the Minotaur. Warning before you read this book, I did read a lot of Percy Jackson growing up. I forgot how weird Greek mythology is. So I would recommend reading an overview of the original myth before reading books like this so that you're not surprised by some of the very strange details that are included. Mostly, there's quite a few Greek mythological stories that have rather salacious storylines as to how we end up with creatures like the Minotaur. You're gonna need to read between the lines to see what I mean for that one. So this is definitely, I would not hand this over to a teenager in your life. This is definitely an adult book. But it was very well written, and while I think trying to figure out how to phrase this. So the issues I had with Morgan Is My Name of following a character who you know is going to turn out at least morally gray, that issue is not present in this book. Ariadne is more kind of the forgotten, lost, misunderstood character in this story, and it served more to give her a voice in the story. And I believe that is the purpose of this book and the other books that this author writes, because she has, I think, 3 other Greek mythology retellings. But this one was fantastic. This I read really fast, considering that it's also a fairly dense book, but it was fantastic. I loved this one. I do have Circe on my list of books to read, which is by Madeline Miller, so a different author, but I would like to read other books by Jennifer Saint as well. The next book I read was The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. This is what the cartoon movie is based on. I have never actually seen that movie. I wanted to read the book first once I knew that it was a book. But this was a delightful fantasy book. I gave it 4 stars. It's labeled as young adult online. I think this would be fine for a middle grade child to read, so someone like 4th grade through 7th grade. There's nothing in it that specifically qualifies it to be a young adult book other than possibly the reading level, but this kind of gives the same vibes as like The Princess Bride or The Chronicles of Narnia, just kind of very classic lighthearted fantasy. But it deals a lot with kind of answering the question of what does it mean to truly be yourself. There's a lot of moments where characters are going through changes, whether they intended to change or not, and kind of what that means for themselves. But it was a really good story. I would love to watch the movie sometime soon. This definitely, I think, if you read it as a younger person, would be a book that becomes very nostalgic for you later in life. So really liked this one. I gave it 4 stars just because it wasn't like absolutely my favorite. Like it didn't kind of give me the same feeling as when I read Trust of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson of like, I felt like it was my new favorite fantasy book, but it was pretty close. So I gave it 4 stars for that reason. The next book I read was an audiobook. And even though I do own this book as a physical copy, I reread Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. Gave it 5 stars. I gave it 5 stars the last time I read it as well. I read these books, and by these books I mean the Crazy Rich Asians trilogy. There are 3 books in the series. I think I read them fairly soon after I graduated college. And I did not remember any of the details from the books. Obviously, in that time frame, the movie came out, and I've loved the movie for several years. It's frequently on our rewatch list when we need like a good comfort movie. We watch that one. And I wanted to reread it because I was in like a slight reading slump towards the end of the month of June, and I wanted to kind of get myself back on track. So I figured since I had been planning on rereading those books anyway, that would be a good way to kind of get out of the reading slump. And I forgot how different the book is from the movie. So if you've seen the movie and you're thinking about reading the books, I still highly recommend it, but there's going to be some big plot changes that are different. Mostly because I think when they did the movie, they were wanting it to kind of be wrapped up all in one movie in case there wasn't a second one. I think there was a plan, at least at one point, to do a second movie, but I don't know where that ended up in production. I think it got messed up from COVID. But in the movie, there are several characters from the book that they had to kind of combine to condense the storylines. The book is following so many different characters in this kind of elite social group. And I found that some of the character storylines in the book were so much more present in the movie that like in watching the movie, I didn't even realize that certain characters were like pretty close to being a main character in the book. So I'm going to briefly talk about a couple of the main differences without spoilers, but if you haven't seen the movie, you might want to skip ahead. Again, they're not like spoilers for the book, but they might be something that like if you're planning on doing both, there's going to be differences. Either way, I'm going to talk about some of the plot points of the book, but not super big crazy spoilers. So in the movie very much shows Rachel Chu as being the main character that the story is about. Whereas the book kind of evenly follows several characters. The biggest ones being Astrid, who is Nick's cousin, both in the book and in the movie, and Nick's mother, Eleanor. But there's other characters who kind of get their own side plots. All the chapters are labeled by who the chapter is about and where it takes place, so you're really bouncing all over the place as the story goes. So I would say in the book, Astrid is as much a main character as Rachel is, sometimes even more leaning towards Astrid. And her storyline has fairly significant not so much plot changes from the movie, but the timeline is off. So Astrid in the book very early on discovers text messages from her husband that imply that he is having an affair, whereas in the movie it's shown at a much later time frame than it is in the book. So in the book you kind of get to watch Astrid wrestle with that problem for a lot longer than you do in the movie. Also, the kind of neat wrapped up ending, especially with how Nick proposes to Rachel, is not the same in the book. So and that one I won't give more details on because I like how it was done in the book better, and I think in the book it obviously left it in such a way more to set up book 2 than the movie did. So Highly recommend it. Also in the book, Piglin gets kind of her own sort of subplot that's going on. There are some chapters dedicated to just her, which I thought was really cool. And there are some characters that are so much nicer than how they were portrayed in the movie. Alistair, for one, is shown as one of Nick's favorite cousins in the book, whereas in the movie he's kind of not really shown in a negative light. He's only shown negatively because of who he's dating, whereas in the book they kind of acknowledge that they don't love who he's dating, but he's a very nice person. But then characters like Eddie and Bernard are so much worse in the book than they are in the movie. And there's just a lot of different dynamics going on. It's very interesting. Colin and Araminta are also very funny in the books, but Colin has a much deeper storyline than how it's shown in the movie, including some mental health struggles. So anyway, there's a lot going on in the book. There's a reason why they are so long. The audiobook was almost 14 hours. I forget how many pages it is, but if you need a good, like, distracting audiobook, this is a good one. It will be hard to do other tasks while listening to it, like pick something chill to do while you listen, but it is very good. The next book I read, I got, I think, from Barnes & Noble, and I picked this one out purely because it lists activities by age. As I said earlier in the podcast episode, I work at a school, and I sometimes reach for parenting books over teaching books because parenting books have a tendency to be more specific about age-appropriate things versus teaching books are by grade. I'm someone who sees kids of all ages, so I kind of like books like this that cover a wide variety of ages for whatever the topic is, because I need more of that, like, breakdown by age instead of by grade level or by content area. So this is How to Raise an Amazing Child the Montessori Way by Tim Selden. And this was a cool book because it breaks down types of activities within the Montessori method with a lot of really great examples, and then broken down sometimes by age. So it talks about how to make smart choices for things like as simple as how much screen time your kid should have, or how to do conflict resolution, but it also has like activities based on different sensory inputs. So how to encourage children to recognize smells or textures or shapes and colors. It also talks about like dealing with change that children have to deal with. So really helpful resource book. I would recommend this to teachers equally as to parents. I'm obviously not a parent yet, but I really enjoyed this book. I did go to a Montessori preschool when I was a kid, up through kindergarten, which now would be K5. So from, I think, 3 years old to 5 years old, I went to a Montessori school. So some of these activities were familiar to me, but it had a lot of really good, simple tips for activities you could do at home just to kind of enhance their learning using the Montessori method. I gave this book 5 stars for that reason, and I'm actually letting a friend borrow this because she was really interested too. The last book I read for the month, I found in a little library, and I could not believe somebody was willing to get rid of this. This is the Subpar Parks book by Amber Scher, and I gave this one 5 stars purely because it's hilarious. This book started as an Instagram account. So Amber Scher is actually a artist, I believe a digital artist. And she started creating really beautiful images for all of the national parks and pairing them with 1-star reviews that they had seen online. So the book kind of takes each national park in the country and uses one of her illustrations along with one of the 1-star reviews. So like for Sequoia National Park, somebody said, "There are bugs and they will bite you on your face." That was their 1-star review. So this book is just funny. It's also just a good overview of all the national parks in the country. She does it by region. This one was Isle Royale National Park in Michigan. Someone said no cell service and terrible Wi-Fi, because you know you need Wi-Fi when you're looking at something like this. So very funny book. Again, I can't believe somebody was getting rid of this. There is also a Subpar Planet book that has international sites with the same format, so I have added that book to my wish list because I think it would be very fun to read. Definitely a great coffee table book. Definitely a great, like, read a couple pages at a time, or like I did, read it all in one sitting. It's only like a page or two for each park, but highly, highly recommend. Also a great gift book if you, if you know somebody who likes hiking or likes going to the national parks. This would be a fantastic gift for someone like that. That's going to be it for this podcast episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening to me ramble about books. If you liked what you saw today, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below so you can be notified of all of my content right here on YouTube. I talk about books, I talk about crafts, and it's generally a good time. And if you want to follow me on other social media sites or check out my online products, you can see that in the description box below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.